Hello and welcome to Brazil's Rewind, the show where I 200 older characters so you don't have to. Today we'll be taking a look at the resurrected version of Dangai Ichigo, who was once the strongest character in the game. In fact, last time I did this I completely skipped over the normal attack build because that was obviously still viable. The game has changed dramatically though, and I won't be doing that this time around, so it's time to see whether or not he's still usable. Now I did start off with a normal attack damage build, and don't let his high attack fool you. It may currently be the highest in the game, but he really only has a plus 20 bruiser. Of course, he's also got a normal attack damage link at 20, so his overall normal attack damage is increased by 40 on his own. Now I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of scared for this build. As some of you may know, this Ichigo has an Espada killer, and since I tested the rewinds at Inheritance Zone, this has resulted in a problem before. This time, however, he was able to overcome it. Obviously, it's not as fast as some other characters since there is no killer multiplication until you get to the boss, but he was dealing enough damage so that I can take out enemies pretty easily, and his strong attacks help knock the enemies down, giving me a bit more time to maneuver. I do feel like they should have given him a higher bruiser because he is a high attack character, but this build is still viable, though unless you drastically increase that attack stat either by Transcendence or via Golden Chappie, I wouldn't take him in any co-op. Still, his attack is high enough, fast enough, and has a good enough reach so this build is still viable, though your clear time may be slower due to lack of killer multiplication. Now next up is a strong attack damage / strong attack recharge build. I decided to combine the two since everyone has access to Frenzy Yoroichi and Frenzy Byakuya. Now if you don't know this, Ichigo does have a high attack, and not that high of an SP, but he does have a plus 50 Berserker, which actually works out pretty well for him, especially when you take into consideration that his resurrected soul trait is a strong attack recharge soul trait of 10%, letting you use your strong attacks more frequently. And they're actually pretty solid strong attacks. His strong attack 3 is a full screen, and his strong attack 2 has really good range. His strong attack 1 also has decent range, but it's deceptively smaller than what you would think it would be. Still, this build resulted in some pretty nice damage. Some of the strong attacks were able to take care of some of the smaller enemies on their own, though unfortunately none of them were able to take care of the big ones by themselves. Luckily for Ichigo, he's got a really high attack that's also really fast, and a plus 40 multiplier on it, so using your normal attacks to finish off some of the enemies was actually viable under this build. Believe me, not everyone has that luxury. Still, I did find myself having to spam strong attacks to take care of enemies, and my clear time was actually over 3 minutes. Granted, a transcended version of this character would finish much faster, but that same thing could be said for Ambassador Seaweed, so we're not playing by those rules. Still, the build is technically viable, though unless you supercharge his SP, I wouldn't recommend it. It was significantly easier than the last build, but it took a lot longer. Bleep bloop. Next up, we have the hybrid build, best of both worlds. I was already using Ichigo's normal attack a lot on his strong attack damage / strong attack recharge build, so it only makes sense to power it up a bit under this build, at the cost of strong attack damage of course. And I actually quite enjoyed this build. Increasing his attack actually helps his strong attacks as well, so it's not like I lost too much damage there. The strong attacks were dealing a decent amount of damage though not taking down any significant enemies, and the normal attacks were able to quickly take out any remaining health. Overall, I'm gonna say it's a pretty solid build, though again, like the first build, unless you have him transcended in some way or 10-10-10, I wouldn't take him in co-op since you can easily get overwhelmed by enemies. Still, the build is viable in single player, and that's typically what I base my decisions on. Honestly, I've always really liked this Ichigo's design, and I'm really bummed out they didn't give him a higher bruiser, especially since he doesn't have that great a killer. And while he is still usable under certain builds, I am curious to see how long that lasts, especially if the game keeps progressing as it is.
Iku yo. Hey, makasetoite. Unare.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe to the channel, and let me know what other characters you want to see in a rewind.